for joining us today. We have so much to do today and so much to talk about. I am thrilled to have a new friend joining me today. Colleen Connolly-Ahern is here. Colleen will be telling you all about her book, Make Book Club Lit Again, which I'll show you. I have a copy of, and it's amazing. So I hope you all have an opportunity to read it. Local friends, if you want to come borrow mine, I might be able to let you see. She's going to be sharing 3 recipes today from the book. All of these recipes have to do with the chapter on Pride and Prejudice, which is, again, one of my favorite books. I'm thrilled that she chose this one. They sound delicious, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy them. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute or put your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure that Colleen answers those questions. If you're going to be cooking along with us today, please let us know. And if we're moving a little too fast, let us know that as well. We're going to try to get through 3 recipes, so we might be moving a little quickly. Some of the stuff we have prepped ahead of time just to save a little time. So if you're chopping as we're doing it, just let us know and we'll try to slow that down a little bit for you. I also want to thank our sponsors, of course, the Office of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity from Outreach and Online Education at Penn State. Thank them for their sponsorship of World Kitchen. And I think I'd like to just now introduce you. Come on over.
All right. Hi, everybody.
So here's the book again. Wonderful book.
Thank you so much.
And you're going to tell us all about how this came to be.
Yes.
And about the recipes in it and what telling me this morning what she did to develop these recipes and the research that went into it. And it's really fascinating. So I'm going to let her take it away, and here we go.
All right. So the book, the book was around in my head for a really long time, but you know, having an academic job, writing to do, but there we were in the middle of a pandemic with a little time on hands, and I thought maybe I will go back to that idea while I can't do my normal kinds of research. And it was originally in my head a date night book. I thought, well, you know, wouldn't you love to have a date just like Cleopatra and Anthony, or like, obviously I went to Pride and Prejudice first, and we thought about it, and I did a nerd night, kind of trying out the idea, and I had so much fun. I on writing. So that's where the book comes from. Over the writing of it, we realized that because I was working with a wonderful editor, that this really would be something that would be really fun for a group of girls to do. So that's how it became a book club book. And I'm going to start by putting this on, because I think we forgot that. We're going to start with the recipe for the zucchini soup, and the reason for that is because it will take the longest, but also this is the time of year where you'd want to make it. It's very much a recipe that's based on an English kitchen garden, and so when I was doing my research, I looked up all the things that would likely be in there, and zucchini would have been one of the things that they would probably have had in abundance, just like we have here at this time of year in central Pennsylvania. So we're going to start. There we go. We'll start with some butter. There would have been plenty of butter. This is a dairy culture, obviously, so you're going to see lots of dairy here. In the book, you know, thinking about the fact that not everybody shows up Irish and wants dairy, there's a lot of alternatives, and most of these recipes will work with dairy alternatives. But I'm going full dairy here today, as Elizabeth and Darcy would have experienced it, hopefully. So again, we're going to start by just melting the butter. You want this on a pretty high heat. And I should have had it going before I didn't quite get there. So once I've got this butter all melted, we're going to put the zucchini in, and then we are going to let it, we want it to kind of caramelize. So that's why I've used the largest possible surface area there. See me working with that. Should be ready in just a second to put that in. And this was 3 rather large zucchini that we got cooked in advance. We're just going to let the stove do its work here for a couple of minutes.
So you chop those into about like maybe 1 inch kind of
Yeah, so I chop these, what I normally do is do them the long way into half moons and then cut those again. And then about 1 inch. You don't want to destroy the zucchini, and you don't want them to get too mushy, but you do want them to be small enough that you can, cook them through without too much time, because, time's the enemy of fresh vegetables. They kind of will get gray on you if you do that. So while that's working, I'm going to go back here. All right, so the next recipe we're going to be doing is tea sandwiches. So what I started with was just putting the lemon zest. I zested the lemon right into the cream cheese. And Tamara asked me why I made her search for the cream cheese earlier today. And it's because I grew up in the New York area, and it's the one you see, but it's so much airier and so much. If you're not planning to do this with a food processor, it makes it really cold in herbs. So let me just grab these herbs over here. There's some dill, there's some tarragon, and there are some chives that go in this. Just put those in.
So if you happen to be in a place where you cannot readily get these herbs, can you use dried ones?
Absolutely. Just what you want to do is make sure that you're changing the proportions. So 1/3 of the amount. So if I said a tablespoon, you'd go to like a teaspoon of dried herbs. They're very intense. Also, make it earlier, just so that you had a bit more time for those to soften up. So it would still be pleasant on your palate. Right, so this is going to go on onto the cucumber sandwiches in just a little bit. I'm going to make this as lovely as possible. I'm going to add a little bit of white pepper. It seems like a lot. And just a little bit of salt. And that's all right. And then this I would normally just put aside in the fridge till I was ready to put the sandwiches together. So I'm going to, oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the trifle from this recipe is one that I worked on for quite a while. But mostly it was because I got a trifle bowl from one of my mom's best friends for my wedding. And having this bowl kind of inspired me to have a trifle, but I didn't see any recipes that weren't so egregiously difficult, starting from like making your own. It didn't seem like you would do it very often, but I wanted to use this beautiful bowl from Tiffany more often than that. So I just asked people what they did, and I read a lot of recipes, and I sort of came up with sort of a shortcut way to do it that got all the pieces in there and was likely to be done a couple of times a year. So what we have here is a jar of very nice jam that we have just melted. And then we let it simmer for a bit so that we would have, which is the best way to see, yeah, there you go. So this is the, there we go. That is the Morello Cherry Jam that we're going to use for the bottom layer of the trifle. Now in the book, I talk about this one. This is the Little Scarlet. Now, this is ridiculously expensive in the current environment. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's almost double the price at the local Wegmans here as the cherry. And they both work completely well. Smucker's is going to work for you. You can use virtually any one. Strawberries are not, would not have been key there. That would have been imported, but it's very, very popular So I do go ahead and use that. If you want it to be more regional, pears, peaches, anything, any kind of a compote would work. All right, so what we're going to do is do a healthy layer of one of our fruits. In this case, we're doing blueberries. And you want to make sure, the most important thing here is going out to the edge. What?
Oh, we're just talking a little bit about the,
Okay,
so the cake you started with was just a frozen.
pound cake.
Yeah.
The biggest job there is thawing it and then just cutting it. You can use any cake. You could use a vegan chocolate cake, for example, I've done. You can do an almond cake. It really works with anything. But again, if this was just a group of people doing it for book club and it was one thing you were doing among many, that nobody doesn't like this particular type of this particular type of cake. I'm an advertising professor, so I have to put a jingle in there. So yeah, that's a very, very simple thing. Homemade cake, obviously that's great. And I have actually used this recipe to salvage a cake that was destroyed during the Penn State Rose Bowl. I was doing something like I wanted to do a rose scented cake and it just didn't release well. And it became a rose trifle that was, I don't think we did that well in the Rose Bowl, but the dessert was good. So you're going to put in a layer now of this jam.
So that's the entire jar.
Entire jar jam. And you want to make sure that it's out to the edges so that it firms, when it firms up, you're going to get a nice view of jam and fruit.
And you warmed this on the stove and kind of boiled it down a little bit.
Yes. So you want to bring it to a simmer. And I'm going to go for about 5 minutes. You want to reduce the water content so it comes together a little bit firmer than just jam, so that it kind of holds the trifle together. So that's holding the first layer together.
It already looks beautiful.
Well, thank you. Now this goes into the fridge. See, this is a lot of stages here. When you do this, you want to set up that first layer. And I'll just go on to another recipe here. So how are we doing on the zucchini? So now you can see you're getting some nice caramelization on that zucchini. And that's exactly what you're looking for. You want that to happen fast so you don't get things too mushy, because you're going to be cooking this through, but you definitely want it to have some additional flavor. You know, zucchini can be not so exciting, but caramelizing it will give it a lot more flavor. All right. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is remove the zucchini. So generally, I'll let this go 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. I think it's gone about 5. So I'm going to pull this off. Spoon.
Wooden spoons are here, or what do you?
No, something like this.
Oh,
See if I can not put this on your.
you did it.
Did not get it on your stove. All right. And then we're going to heat this back up. Put in the other portion of the butter from the rest. And once that comes up to heat, we will add the onions. All right. And again, we're going to coat those well. We're going to add a little bit of salt. Should put some a little off. Add the salt right here. And then we're going to let those work again for about 7 to 10. Again, you want these to get nice and rich. You don't want them to be charred in any way, but you definitely want to get these cooked through so you don't have any onion flavor coming through in your soup later on. All right, so at this stage, we can move on to the tea sandwiches. We've already prepared one tray of these. And I'll tell you the story of these sandwiches actually goes back to my daughter, Eleanor. We were in a really pretty British tea room somewhere in Marylebone, and she was all excited about this tea tray when it came. And then she got to the cucumber sandwich and it was kind of wet and nasty. and she was trying to be all big, and she was like 11, and she just, you could tell she wanted to spit this thing out, but she knew she wasn't supposed to. So I was just like, it's all good. And then she moved on to the scones and we were all fine. But I thought, there's got to be a way to make these tea sandwiches work a little bit better, because the concept of cucumber sandwich is good, great vegetarian thing for your picnic. So what I tried was to actually, in the book, this is just kind of a process. So the process for making a good tea sandwich is you start with butter, a good butter. I mean, I would normally use Kerrygold butter, which we can easily get here, but any good cultured butter would work. And I'll just show you, these have already been done, but the process here is pretty simple.
Now the bread you're using is this very, very thin.
Yeah, you want to start with this very, very thin white bread. The one that we can find here is Pepperidge Farm. If you live in an area where a bakery will slice a firm white bread for you, or a farmer's loaf, that will work fantastic too. But in our area, this is the one that we tend to be able to get hold of. So you want a very, very thin bread. Sometimes you can get this in whole wheat, but your white sandwich is the classic. So we're just going to go with that. Now the little, yes, here it is. So the process that you want to do is to coat this so that you really can't see the holes anymore. All right. And then you're going to put it into the fridge. Now, what I do when I have a lot of them is fold put each of them with layers of saran wrap in between. And then I just leave them in the fridge till I'm ready to do them. You don't want the bread to harden. Now, we were doing these just for immediate use, but I would leave it like this. And then this goes into the fridge. All right. So these are the ones that have been pre-refrigerated. And now we're going to work on the cucumbers. So what I did was take a bunch of cucumbers. I think I used 4 mini cucumbers. I sliced them thin, very thin, but if you have a mandolin, even better. And I salted them for about an hour and a half, right? And then what we're going to do is take a cotton, thank you. Let's take a cotton tea towel, and we are going to get them all on there. And then we are going to let physics work for us. And we're going to gather it up like this, gather it up and twist. Wow. And what you will see is how much water is coming out of these cucumbers. And all of that was in Ellie's sandwich, which is why we got the sad face. So this is to alleviate the sad face. And if you have a recipe for tzatziki, for example, you've probably already seen this process. I certainly didn't make it up. I just borrowed it from another culture and moved it into Regency English for my own purposes. All right.
So these sandwiches would have traditionally, you kind of mentioned, been a picnic sandwich or a high tea sandwich, or
Exactly.
yeah.
So
they needed to travel.
They needed to travel, and they needed to be pretty sturdy.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, there's this mini revival of tea sandwiches all over London, and you can see people making them fancier and fancier. This is the tried and true. And it kind of, I think it sounds weird to some Americans, a cucumber sandwich. It's not our go-to, but it really does make a nice vegetarian option at a picnic. And they've become sort of a thing in our family where every once in a while we'll just do tea. All right, so I'm going to move this back. All right, and now we can start to put together our sandwiches. So you're going to see these look nice and dark, and we've got a lot of the water out. And so, actually, that's spread. Alice, what we're going to do is, all right, so we will put the spread that we made before is going to go on half of the sandwich. And you want a nice thick layer because when you cut these later, you want to see a layer of white and a layer of green. Okay, you want to spread that out to the ends. Now, there's two ways to cut these sandwiches. You can cut them in little airplanes or triangles, or you can cut them in finger sandwiches. If I was going to cut them into finger sandwiches today, I would have cut the crusts off at this point and folded them to do that. So I had two mirror images of each other, but it seems a sin to waste them if they're just going to be standing up anyway. So I'm not terribly fussy about it. I will keep the crust, especially if I'm doing the triangles. And so that's what we're doing today. Right. So we're going to go ahead. And you can see that one of the reasons for doing this earlier and putting the butter on is that you get a firm layer and it doesn't mix with the butter. What you're looking for is a nice strata here. So I didn't realize there were so many layers in today until I just said that. And now I did. I made a little bit of a mess with that guy, but it's all good because it's going to be down. So nothing bad can happen. Right. So today we're just doing 4 of these for you here.
Typically, how many does this make?
Well, on this small, there's a slightly wider bread that I've also gotten, and that one makes 8 sandwiches. But for the purposes of this, and I always have a little bit of the extra spread, but it just is so good on a bagel that you won't be sorry that it's in your fridge. You'll think of things to do with it. I'm going to grab that paper from you again. Okay, so now we're going to take our cucumber slices and daintily overlap them. How am I doing on my onions? Do I need to look over there? I haven't.
And a little dark.
Okay, a little too dark. All right.
No, they're definitely caramelizing.
Okay. I'm going to do the first one and then I'm going to go back to those and we'll set up the rest of the soup. Okay. So what you want is these to form a complete layer. Again, you don't need to, especially with the mini cucumbers, there's absolutely no reason to peel them, so you'll get 2 very nice greens when you cut. And then what I generally do is you want to put this together gently. You don't want to lose the layers, but you do want to make sure that the cucumbers get impacted into the butter. And then I wrap these up and they're ready to go. They can go in the fridge for up to a day. So they're really good pre-made for a picnic. Right, so let me just go over here and not burn the onions. All right, so once you get the onions where you want them, you add back in your zucchini and all the juices that have come out of the zucchini. And there you go. Let that come up to heat. And now we're going to start making it soup. All right. So once that gets back up to heat, we're going to add in, you can either use chicken broth. If you do that, veggie broth, water will work, but you're going to get a lot more flavor from stock or broth. If you have homemade, that's awesome. Most of us don't have that kind of time. So if you don't have that kind of time, it's not a problem. Even better than bouillon works really, really well. All right, you're going to add, oh, I need about half a cup of water. And what you're looking for is most of the zucchini to be under the broth. Okay, that's going to continue to release some water, but now we're going to bring it up to heat and we're going to let that cook down. Oh, you know what I did? I did a bad thing. I forgot, right as I put the zucchini in, I was supposed to add the mustard. Now, little bit of this Coleman's mustard goes a very long way. Normally, you would put it in when you're sauteing, but nothing bad's going to happen if we put it in with the rest of the soup. All right, and now this can just work over here. You want it to come up to a boil, then simmer it. All right. Now you've got the basis for your soup. Okay, so we're just continuing on, layering these sandwiches. And again, these are fun for travel. My family and I, when we do car trips, we normally pack lunches just to kind of go faster and to eat a little bit better. And these are a really nice thing because again, they hold up really well in your cooler. And you don't need, well, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I attended a couple of high teas, as they're called, at different places. We took a WPSU trip down to Winterthur Gardens and got to have high tea at a local hotel after our trip. And then somewhere else we did a high tea. But anyway, I noticed that there were a variety of tea sandwiches.
yes.
So what are some of the others that you might create?
Really, you can put any couple of things together and it's a great leftover thing.
Mhm.
A very common one is, and the other one in the book is a chicken salad
Mhm.
that I make with a chutney cream.
Mm.
And the chicken salad has currants in it. Again, just all things that would have been available in a Regency home. But you don't even have to go that far. I mean, you can easily make layers with stuff from boar's head. I mean, and it'll look just as nice.
Mhm.
You can make horseradish mayo by just adding some horseradish into your mayonnaise, or you could make a Dijon mayo, depending on the colors that you wanted. And then turkey works, ham works. I mean, whatever you have around can be a tea sandwich. It's more the process and the butter layer. And you'll see that there's going to be a little bit of green here in a moment. But what you want it to look like, and it is nice to have multiple types, but what you're looking for is something where the center has, adds a really, really nice color to the white bread,
Mhm.
so that it's nice and appealing. And so I opened this too fast. All right, so we were lucky today in State College yesterday, and we're able to get some watercress. That's not always possible. Arugula works fine. Baby spinach will work fine. But I just put a nice little layer of greens.
So for those of us who have not experienced watercress, what's the flavor?
A lot like arugula. It's a little
Okay.
peppery.
Yeah.
It should have, it's floral and peppery.
Okay.
And it's sometimes not easy. It doesn't hold as long as spinach.
Mm.
So if you know that you need to shop a couple days early, I'd go for spinach here, because it can get a little yellow on itself. But it does have a really nice, unique flavor. Would you like to try? Let's try one. It's kind of a little herbal.
It's oh, I get it. Yeah.
It does add a layer.
A little firm,
Mhm.
stiff. I get the pepper now. Yeah.
Yeah, when it has something to it, and it does add a unique flavor, and especially with the cucumber, there's not a lot of flavor in a cucumber.
I
So-
can almost see with a kid, though, you might want to go with a spinach. 'cause
Spinach,
this is a
yeah.
strong flavor.
It is. And frankly, I don't have to worry about it much because you so often can't get it that I tend to. Now, if you have a kid that doesn't like arugula,
Mhm.
don't go here because this is even a little stronger than
Yeah,
that.
I think so.
Right? So as you get them done, you're going to just press firmly down. And again, normally the next step would be to wrap these individually and let them sit till I was ready to slice them up and put them on a board. But I think today we'll just put them in as is.
Mhm.
But the directions will clearly tell you how you want to have those wrapped individually. And the reason is, you don't want if the longer this firms up, the neater and more beautiful your slices are going to be. And that's sort of important when you want to be all pretty and fussy. So we don't have time to set it up today with lots of layers, but if you were doing it, just take the time. It's a great do ahead the day before sort of thing. And they do work well in lunch boxes. They will, like I said, they travel well.
Mhm.
And I don't bother to cut them when I'm traveling with them. And, you still get a perfect, well, just in half usually. So it doesn't have to be as ornate, but it certainly can be. And I know the year after Eleanor did the tea, we did high tea for her birthday party. And this was one of the things that she asked for. There's always usually a scone and clotted cream at a high tea. That's very common. And there is one in the book. We decided we couldn't do absolutely everything today. But again, that's one that when I was talking to my editor, she said, could you put something in here that is vegan, even though you give suggestions for it being vegan? So the scone is a vegan scone. And it's pretty easy to execute. But again, baking, bakers are chemists.
Yeah, for sure.
And I am not. So that one took a lot of time to kind of make sure that we had it so that it would work for almost anybody. All right. So I think we're just about done here. We're going to pack these up. You want to press them down because you want the bread to be sort of part of this. As you cut it later, you don't want it to slide. And so the tighter that you wrap it well, I usually use plastic. It's one of my single-use plastic vices is these sandwiches. Try to avoid it, but they really do work for this. You could use aluminum foil, I suppose, would probably also work.
Or even parchment paper.
Parchment might work. It's the pull that you don't want to hold it together. Sometimes parchment, it's hard to get that to happen. But anyway, these will sit until we're ready to slice. In the recipes that you guys got, we had a different version of bird's custard than the one that was available today. So today, if you were doing this, oddly, I've never seen this one before, but this is an instant version, which is sort of fun. So the recipe that you got involves the bird's powder that does not have the sugar or the cornstarch or anything in it already, but it comes like this all together. And Tamara and I have never used it before, but we're going to use it today because it's here. All right. So according to this, normally what you would do, and I will caution you, if you want to make this dairy free, you want to find it's usually a jar of custard mix, because that can be reconstituted with any kind of non-dairy milk. So if you're trying to avoid dairy, I would go this way. This one has the milk powder in it, which will be very, very nice for us. And this is about 3/4 of a cup.
Say when.
Okay. That looks right. Okay. So here we go. So what we're doing is adding. This is like the fanciest whisk I've ever used. And I'm very excited about it.
It's a very well-known whisk for those who have been watching World Kitchen for a couple of years with me. Somebody early on said they actually managed to find one somewhere, but I can't remember where they said they found it.
Oh my gosh. So the next layer of the trifle is all bound together with custard. Now, I read in some description of trifle that you're not supposed to have too much custard, but everybody wants the piece with the most custard. So,
Sounds like me.
so you can put as much custard as you want, as far as I'm concerned. But this is what's going to hold the whole rest of the dessert together. Okay, so I think this has to cool a bit according to these directions. And we let it stand. So while it's standing, we're going to get the rest. Well, where's our trifle? I don't know.
Oh, you want the trifle?
The trifle. Let's do the next layer. All right, and you can see that's firmed up a bit. And so what we're going to do next is add the rest of the cake. And we're going to douse this cake with just a little bit of sherry. Now, sherry is kind of critical to Regency cooking. And part of that is because, well, the Napoleonic Wars had impacted both the making of wine and then also the distribution system. So the British, in desperation, decided that they would get their wines from Portugal or Spain. But those weak bottles did not go across the Atlantic very well, or around the Iberian Peninsula very well. So they kept exploding. And they figured out ultimately that if they added brandy and fortified the wine, it was way less volatile and it would make it longer. So that is why you see all kinds of recipes in the Food of England project that have things like Madeira or port or sherry, which is what we're using here today. And that is just simply because of the history of the time. And that was kind of what was really fun once I picked the 4 books that I thought it would be fun for book clubs to read. So there's Pride and Prejudice, which I assumed most people would be doing as a reread, but then also Pepita Jimenez, which is it's a Spanish novella, which is told in letters, which is really, really very fun and has a fun twist at the end. A lot of Americans haven't read it, or if they have, they read it in Spanish class, like way back in the day. It's a pretty good one to start with. But you can read it in English, there are translations. And then I did the Tale of Chun Yang. And then I was an undergraduate medievalist. So I actually used Eric and Enid as a medieval. But the fun thing about that was that once I picked the stories that I thought it would be fun for book clubs to read, then I did all the work on the food history and spent a lot of time thinking about that. So I'm going to put this layer. Now, I'm not going to tell you how much sherry. It's kind of, and again,
Up to your taste.
it's up to your taste. And liqueurs will work. Like if other types of things would work. Like if I was going to try and do this like a Black Forest kind of idea, I'd use a chocolate cake and cherries, and then I'd use Kirschwasser. So I mean, it would work in a million different ways. So this layer, we're going to do raspberries. And again, you want those at the edge so people can see how pretty it is. And then once that's all in, we're going to put in our custard. This is a little looser than what when you cook it down, you can kind of do it a little bit longer. But it's coming together right there. And this has done its job. And we will put the custard over the top. And that is what is going to hold this all together. You can see it dripping down the sides. That's very much what you want. All right.
Carolyn, the birds, instant birds is just, it's at Wegmans. They had it in both the international section and you can see how it's all dripping down the sides there. Yes, beautiful. And over near the spices and things like that.
Okay. So once again, this gets to depart and go back into the fridge.
Okay.
So it's very simple, but just takes a little time to schedule the layers. You want them to firm up so that when you dig into it later, and there's no way to serve it so that it's not a mess a little bit, but you do want the pieces to be sort of like firmly held together. All right, so I think we're probably ready to start thinking about finishing the soup. So the soup has a bunch of herbs that would have been pretty common in an English garden as well. And one of the things I have here is rosemary. It also includes thyme. I've already put the thyme together. When you're working with rosemary, obviously, you don't want to use that stem. That's not good eats, as somebody very famous once said. But it's very easy to peel the leaves off, and then you want them chopped fairly fine. But this is going to be motorboated, or you can do it in a blender or in your food processor if you have a big enough capacity for the soup. Or you can do it in batches, it doesn't really matter. So I don't worry too very much about this being super small because it is going to be, but you don't want big chunks of rosemary. That's great flavor, but not when it gets stuck in your teeth. All right. So let's see how the soup is doing. So you can see that the zucchini has cooked itself down. And there's some lemon in that recipe. Now you can add it, I usually add it a little bit later for flavor, but one thing that I found was that if I want this to sit for a while, it can get a little gray, you lose the pretty green of the zucchini. So if you add the lemon a little bit earlier, it'll help you fix some of that color. So that's not the way the recipe is written, and it tastes fine either way. But if you want it to have a little bit more sex appeal, you can add that a little bit earlier. Okay, so we've got this just about where we want it. We can take it off heat, and we're going to reduce the heat, and we're going to add a cup of half and half. Again, I have not done it this way, but there are plenty of non-dairy half and halves that I think would work just as well. You'd have to try that out, but I can't see why it wouldn't work. All right, so that's going to give you the lovely cream in there. All right, that's the half and half. That's that nice creamy flavor that you're going to get. All right, and then we are going to add just a little bit. Actually, we're going to add the sugar. So now we need the motorboat. All right, so once you've got this all together, I'm going to not burn it up. We're going to use the motorboat to just puree this. Again, if you have a big blender, you can do this in batches. You can probably want to let it sit cool before you do that. The motorboat has the virtue of going directly. You can get this as pureed as you want. You can, it's kind of pretty to see some of the green flecks in there. But if you want it to be completely pureed and fancy, you can do that as well. You could also use a food mill. And that would give you some of the flex, but also a nice puree. So any of those will work. I'm gonna stop. All right. All right, so. Okay. So once you've got the soup pureed to where you want it, you want to gently bring it up to heat. Once you put the half and half in, you don't want to bring it up to a boil again. And then I just add just a little bit of sherry again for good flavor. This is where you're going to test it for salt. And if you see any big bulky pieces, you can go back and puree even more. All right. So
When do you add in your herbs?
the herbs are going to be in just when this comes back up to the heat, you can just add in your herbs. You don't want them to sit too long. You want them to be super fresh.
Okay.
So the herbs aren't really cooking a whole lot.
No. No, they're not. You want that super fresh bite from it. But if you're holding the soup for a while, it's not going to damage it. It'll just have a slightly different flavor, like a more kind of going from a summer flavor to kind of more of a fall flavor where something sits for a really long time. Okay. So that's pretty much, your soup is pretty much together. Again, you could puree it more, you could puree it less. So the last thing that we need to do is build a little bit. So we're going to build your whipped cream. A cup of whipped cream to bring it up to seat. All right. Sugar, completely optional. I mean, dairy is so sweet by itself that I don't really, and there's so much sweet already in the rest of the trifle. I don't really worry about it very much. Just a little bit of vanilla, but if you want up to like 2 tablespoons, that's completely up to you. So you can see I'm a messy cup. All right, so just going to whip this. There. Now, I would say that whipped cream's great, but you can also, in a pinch, just use Ready Whip. It's fine. Nothing bad happens. And if you're keeping to a non-dairy diet, both Ready Whip has both coconut and almond at this point, so that you can get the same effect. Quite a job on you. You'll know you're getting to the right place when you can continue to see lines in your whipped cream. And there they are. You can see that that will hold the line right there. You don't want to go too far past that because what you don't want is butter on top of this, which every school kid knows you can make. All right, so let me swatch you. I should have grabbed that before. Thank you. Right. You're going to put the whipped cream right on top of the trifle. And you want to smooth it out so that you get a nice thin layer.
Now, are you pressing it at all, or are you just letting it be very lightly in the bowl?
Well, I'm trying to let it be a little bit lightly in the bowl, but I want a smooth top.
Mhm.
And I probably, for the size of this bowl, could have probably even had a little bit more cream, but just want it covered like that. You can see a little of them poking through, but they're going to be covered in a minute. You can do a bigger layer of whipped cream if you want, but then you can also just cover them so everybody knows what they're going to be digging into later. And there you go.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you.
That's just gorgeous.
And that can sit for a little while in the fridge. It's nice to have it done at least a half hour early so that it all sets together. And you can see you got some nice layers of the cream and everything right there. And that's done. So as you can see here, what you want to do is cut these corner to corner in a light sawing motion so that you're not breaking the layers. And then after each one, you're going to wipe your knife clean.
Carolyn is asking, would you recommend trying to cook along while you gather with your book club and discuss the book while nibbling?
My thought originally, Carolyn, was to have everybody do one piece. And it's very much designed that way. And included in the book are ideas for the people that don't want to cook, or that's not in their wheelhouse. So what could you bring? So you can do all the recipes or one as a show, just to kind of showpiece it. But there are alternatives for almost everything. So that I kind of envisioned it as something that everybody would bring the piece that they liked, whether that's the sherry or the, and here you can see our lovely layers.
Beautiful.
Set those up. And you can serve these on individual plates, or you could put together all of the sandwiches at once and let people choose.
Maddie says we can drop that trifle off at her place when we're done.
I'll be right on that. All right. And so you would just continue to arrange these. Again, if you had done multiple types, it's really nice to alternate them. But the whole idea is to just have something. If you've seen an English tea tray, they tend to be in tiers. So this would be the tier that has the your starter, obligatory, savory, and then you're allowed to go on to the sweets. All right, and then let's plate the soup. All right. So the last thing we're going to do for you here is plate the soup up. Now the soup is a zucchini soup with Stilton, and the reason I chose Stilton is because that is actually from the area where most people think Austen set Pride and Prejudice. But it's not a necessary element. So if you're not a blue cheese eater, nothing bad's going to happen if you don't include the cheese. I think if you don't put a lot in, it's more to me like when you have anchovies in a pasta sauce, like in puttanesca, you don't really taste fish, right? It's the umami of it is what you're really looking for. But you could easily use like a hard cheddar or something like that if you wanted some cheese flavor without. So there you see your soup is all done. Again, I like the green flakes, the green flecks that you get from not completely pureeing it, but if you want it to be perfectly green and pretty, you can do that as well. And you're going to finish it off with just a little bit of Stilton, which can be swirled in. And again, if you don't have access to Stilton, that's not a problem. You could use literally any blue cheese would work. You can go from very, very mild, like a Dana blue, to as funky as you want. You know, it's completely up to you. Stilton is a pretty funky one. So if you're just trying blue, you might want to look for something more milky and a little more family friendly. Depending on the kids, you might not want to use blue cheese at all. It's completely flexible that way.
Betty's saying she's very hungry now, so that looks delicious. Let's see, do we want to, I know that the trifle hasn't really had time to set up, but I guess we could.
I can try to serve a little bit of it. Though if we let this sit for an hour, you'd get a nice kind of whole piece. But the thing about a trifle is that no matter what you do, it's kind of like a souffle. You just got to go in. It's not going to look pretty once you, but it's worth it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this. You want to go all the way down. That's the proviso here, because you want all the layers. And serve it like that. There you go. And somebody might be mad if they lose some of their berries. So if you have to go in twice, it's absolutely okay. There we go.
Beautiful. All right, let me move this out of the way and we will just kind of show our 3 recipes there. Okay, all right. So sandwiches, the soup, and the trifle. Wow, this looks amazing.
Yep.
We're excited to get to try all of this as soon as you guys are gone. So we'll let you know how it goes. Thank you for joining us. Please check out our website, because the next World coming very quickly. It is in just a couple of weeks on September 11th. It is already on WPSU.org, so please check that out. And that will be Ethiopia. It will be a vegetarian/vegan world kitchen. So please join us then as well. And thank you so much, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.